So the Sigma BF is by its design a minimalist camera, and I find that very interesting, but I don't just mean minimalist in the physical sense, but the software side too. It's very much pared down, and even the interface by which you access it is completely different. It's simplified, and I really like that way of operating things. I have a background in software engineering, and I have a lot of time for a simple interface that controls something very powerful. But minimalism has a downside, and that's usually discoverability. This is very obvious on Apple devices, for example, because I highly doubt anyone watching this video knows all of the touch gestures available on their MacBook or on their iPhone. And that's the case here on the Sigma BF as well. Really nice camera, but I keep finding new features on it 2 weeks later. So here are 5 of my favourite, somewhat hidden Sigma BF features. The selling points of the BF for me is that it has a fairly decently sized built-in SSD for storage. But some people were concerned about what happens when you fill it. Do you need to be carrying your computer around with you? Well, no. I mean, if you do carry your computer around with you, it's very easy because it just functions like a mass storage device, unlike many other cameras. Looking at you, Nikon, with your weird media device interface over USB. It's just really irritating. This just acts like an external SSD, and you can just copy the files with whatever you want, including on your phone. I can plug it into my iPhone, just browse the files and copy them off. Really nice. But it doesn't just support computers, it also supports USB-C storage devices itself. So if you're carrying a USB-C SSD around with you, you can just transfer the files off. And you can do it by day, which is the hidden feature here. When the interface is up, you need to press down on the directional pad, and it will allow you to select entire days to transfer at a time. It's really quick, it's a very, very nice feature. And an extra bonus here as well is that it doesn't have to be a USB-C SSD, it can be a memory card reader. And in this example, I'm using a CF Express Type B card. It's really cool, nice and compact, and you can have an awful lot of storage on you without taking up a huge amount of space. Now, one curiosity with this camera is the way you navigate the menu, and by default nothing displays on the screen, and this isn't unique to the BF. You can turn off the information display on most cameras, I think, but I really like that this is how it arrives. There is this secondary screen where it shows your current active menu item, and you're going left to right to sort of tab through them, which seems a bit long-winded, but you can also go up and down. Well, that is even more curious, but what you're actually doing is navigating the menu. Just not visible. So when you press in the center button, it brings up the menu, and you can see how you're going up and down across it, you're going side to side, etc. It's really, really nice, and when it's not there, well, it's just not cluttering up your interface. You can pick whichever setting you want to be your current active one. I mean, I don't know why you'd want to scroll through DNG, JPEG options, but you can. I like that you can change the crop really quickly. I find that really interesting. And then when you start half pressing the shutter, it changes. It's now exposure compensation, and it shows your shooting settings, the most important things, on the bottom as well. It's a really nice feature. You can toggle different settings on and off. You can make it show the shooting information all the time, but I like that by default it is just minimal. It's different, and it certainly takes a bit of getting used to. It took me half an hour to really understand how I was navigating anything, but once you are used to it, it's quite relaxing, really, to have something that just feels simplistic, even though it's actually not. Well, I've escaped back to the river to get away from the heat, although the heat is mostly following me because I'm wearing a woolen shirt in July. But anyway, an aspect that I haven't really seen anyone touch on is using adapted old lenses with the BF I think it's a great camera for that, particularly because it's very small, and combined with the adapters for the L mount not having to be too deep, I think it's a really nice setup. And there's a hidden feature for this as well, which I'll get to in a minute. But I have been really enjoying the compactness of this camera, particularly with different bags. And this bag was sent to me very recently. This is a PGY Tech One Go Lite. Really like this bag, particularly with the BF, because I've never historically had a lot of use for these side access things, but because the BF is just so easy to get in and out of a bag because of how smooth it is, I think it works really well. And I like the fact that there's a pocket here for all your batteries, which you're probably going to need with the BF. Very nice. They sent it to me for free, so obviously keep that in mind, but there'll be some links down below. Anyway, in terms of all the lenses on the BF, well, doesn't this look quite cool? I don't know why, it just looks more proportional on this camera as a sort of an adapter setup than it does on many other cameras. I feel like on many sort of manual lens, mirrorless camera combinations, it just looks a bit dorky, but I think this looks quite cool. Especially if you attached an M mount adapter, which would be a bit smaller. With some M mount lenses, I think that would make it really quite compact. And there is a hidden feature here as well. When you have attached your manual lens, a menu option will come up that says no lens. So you go into no lens and you can set up the lens. You can say the focal length and the aperture, the maximum aperture. And I'm assuming it uses that information to adjust the electronic stabilization in video. Not too sure about that, but otherwise it will update in the metadata at least. Very nice. But there's an additional feature as well. So I have already set this up. You can go into there, and then if you press right on the pad, it will say point camera at monotone surface, color shading compensation. So you point it at, say, a white wall, and you take a photo, and then it does do something. It seems to color correct the image in some way. I'm going to assume it's something tied to like the light fall off, maybe the vignetting, but it doesn't correct the vignetting. So the short summary of this is I don't know what it does, but it's a cool feature if it does something, because I've never seen it on another camera, and I think that's really quite interesting. Anyway, very cool, and I do like using manual focus lenses on this camera. There's something about the form factor with them. It sits comfortably in my hand. The focus peaking works really well. Really quite like it. Here's a quick bonus hidden feature that I've only just discovered, and this is my point about the discoverability of this camera. I keep finding new features, and that is that it does have punch-in zoom functionality for manually focusing. So you half press the shutter and you press the center button and it zooms in. It does appear to be time limited, and I would prefer it if that wasn't the case. I'd like an option to just have it be on until I toggle back out, but maybe they can add that in the future. But even more interestingly, if you do that, you can also then scroll on the wheel to change how zoomed in it is. So next time I do it, it'll be 4x zoom. That's a cool little feature, and yeah, I literally discovered that while filming this video. Now, the BF brings a bunch of improvements over the FP and the FPL, particularly in terms of autofocus, and this is something for which Sigma should be commended because it's a fairly big step forward in a relatively short space of time. And there are a bunch of non-obvious features here. Number one being, it actually does have single point tracking continuous autofocus, which is a feature I use all the time on my Nikon Z9 to focus and recompose, but in continuous autofocus mode. I really like this feature. I actually never shoot in single shot autofocus on my Z9. I do on other cameras, but it just works so well in that. And the interface in this is extremely similar, which I really like. It's very straightforward, but there's a little bit of a hidden feature here in that if you're shooting in the wide area AF, so you've got two options on this. You've got single point or the whole screen basically. There's no zones that I can see. But if you're in that wide area AF and you acquire your focus on something, so you're half pressing on the focus, well, you can then press on the center button in the directional pad and it will switch to center point tracking. Very interesting. I actually didn't discover this until last night. So that's a nice feature to have, and it generally seems to track things really well, which is a very nice thing. Now, there's an oddity in the AF system, which I think I understand the reasoning for, but it's that if you're shooting in either single shot or continuous autofocus, you can, after acquiring focus, press forward and back on the directional pad, and it will shift the focus in and out by a seemingly indeterminate distance. And according to the manual, this seems to be to help it to move on from maybe an incorrectly acquired subject. So say you're trying to focus on someone in the distance, but it focuses on the person closer, you can press the button and it will move to the more distant one, I believe. Interesting feature. I've not really seen this on any other cameras. I know Panasonic have something kind of similar. You can set to function buttons to tell it to go either to the furthest detected object or the nearest one, I think. I guess that's kind of similar, but it's an interesting feature nonetheless, and I stumbled across it by accident. It was something that was not particularly obvious at all. Now, one hidden feature of this camera has already been covered elsewhere, or at least the one that I definitely know has been covered elsewhere, and that is that the camera embeds gain maps in its JPEG files. And what this means is that if you load the JPEGs on a device that is HDR compatible, and I'll use an iPhone for example for this because they have OLED screens now, they definitely are capable of that. There's a lot of misinformation about HDR screens, but these are ones I know work. Then the device will have information about how to adjust the brightness of different parts of the image. It will brighten the highlights and it will keep the sort of shadows a bit darker. Very interesting. It's a really cool feature, and the best part about it is that it's backwards compatible, which is awesome because there's a lot of confusion still in the HDR sort of space. No one's really settled on an image format. Some cameras are creating HEIF files, HEIF files. They're not even supported on everything still, somehow. I don't really know why, but this is backwards compatible, and it's just a nice bonus. If you load a JPEG from this, and as an everyday camera, you're probably going to use the JPEGs, well, it just looks better. You load it on a phone, you can just take a JPEG off it, stick it on your phone, send it to somebody else. If their phone also supports it, it will look vibrant, really, really nice. And if their phone doesn't support it, it'll look exactly the same as usual. Very cool. Well, that's it for my list of hidden features on the Sigma BF. Do you know of any more? Well, please do put them down in the comments below. And indeed, any hidden features on other cameras that you know about. I really like finding out about these things. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time, albeit not with the Sigma BF, as it is going back this week. And that'll be a very sad day. Although they will have to catch me first. She's it!